Commander Zekthal stood on the bridge of his warship, looking out at the small blue planet through the viewing screen. His black eyes studied the world that would soon belong to the Cathari Confederation. This would be conquest number 74. Another easy victory for his people. The Cathari had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years. They were born hunters, standing 8 feet tall, with muscles like steel cables. Their claws could cut through metal, and their cybernetic implants made them faster and stronger than any natural creature. No species had ever defeated them in battle. Zekthal flexed his claws as he read the intelligence reports about the humans. They were a young species, barely capable of traveling between planets. Their weapons were simple projectile guns that fired metal bullets. They had no genetic enhancements, no cybernetic implants, and no advanced biotechnology. Most laughable of all, they were small and soft, with fragile skin that could be torn easily. Commander, his second-in-command, Veltar said, approaching. With quick steps, the scouting ships are ready to deploy. Should we begin the standard intimidation protocol? Zekthal nodded. The intimidation protocol had worked on every species they had encountered. They would attack a small outpost, demonstrate their superior strength, and usually the entire species would surrender within days. It saved time and resources. Target their moon base, Zekthal ordered. A small show of force should be enough. To make them understand their situation, Cathari assault ships moved silently through space toward Luna Base, a human research station orbiting Earth's moon. Inside the lead ship, war leader Caxaloom prepared his team of 12 elite warriors. Each Cathari was worth 50 normal soldiers from most species. Against primitive humans, they would be unstoppable. On Luna Base, Sergeant Jake Morrison was finishing his night shift in the security office when the alarms started screaming. The base computer announced unknown ships approaching at high speed. Jake grabbed his assault rifle and ran toward the main corridor, his combat boots echoing on the metal floor. Jake had been a Marine for 8 years. He had fought in 3 different wars on Earth and never backed down from a fight. At 28 years old, he was considered one of the best soldiers in the Earth Defense Force, but nothing had prepared him. For what came through the airlock, the Cathari warriors moved like liquid death. Their claws sparked against the metal walls as they ran through the corridors. Their cybernetic eyes glowed red in the dim emergency lighting. They expected to find humans cowering in fear, begging for mercy like every other species they had conquered. Instead, they found Jake Morrison standing in the middle of the corridor, his rifle aimed directly at them. Well, Jake said with a slight smile. Looks like we got ourselves some ugly visitors. War leader Caxaloom stopped in surprise. The small human should have been running in terror. Instead, he was making jokes. Caxaloom had conquered 43 worlds and had never seen anything like this. Surrender, primitive creature, Caxaloom growled in broken human language. Your death will be quick if you submit now. Jake laughed. You know what, big guy? I got a better idea. The human opened. Fire. The bullets should have bounced off Cathari armor like raindrops. But Jake wasn't firing randomly. He aimed for the joints where the armor plates connected, for the sensor arrays on their helmets, for the weak points that every armor had. Years of fighting had taught him that every enemy had vulnerabilities. 3 Cathari warriors fell in. The first 5 seconds, Caxvel couldn't believe what he was seeing. This soft little creature was systematically destroying his elite warriors with primitive weapons. But more disturbing than the human's skill was his attitude. He was enjoying himself. Come on. Jake shouted as he rolled behind a support beam, reloading his weapon. Is this the best the big bad aliens can do? My grandmother fights better than you guys. The remaining Cathari spread out, trying to surround the human. They had never encountered resistance like this. On every other world, the local species would either flee or beg for mercy. This human was actively hunting them. Jake moved through the base like he owned it. He knew every corridor, every hiding spot, every tactical advantage. When the Cathari tried to corner him in the cafeteria, he triggered the fire suppression system, filling the room with foam that blinded their sensors. When they chased him into the storage bay, he dropped shipping containers on them with the loading crane. War. Leader Caxaloom found himself down to 6 warriors and facing a single. human who seemed to be having the time of his life. This was not how conquests were supposed to go. "What are you?" Caxvalum demanded when he finally cornered Jake in the reactor room. Jake checked his ammunition. He was down to his last magazine, and there were still 6 aliens left. Not good. But Jake Morrison had never been one to worry about odds. "Me. I'm just a guy from Detroit who doesn't like uninvited guests," Jake said. Looked around the reactor room and smiled. "But you want to know what I really am?" Jake pulled a thermal detonator from his belt. It was a maintenance device used for clearing blocked coolant pipes, but it would make a very big explosion in a confined space. "I'm the guy who's about to ruin your whole day." Caxville's eyes widened. Human was going to destroy himself just to kill them. No species they had ever encountered would make such a choice. It went against every survival instinct in the galaxy. "You will die too," Caxvalum shouted. Jake shrugged. "Yeah, probably. But you definitely will, and that's good enough for me." The human activated the detonator. Commander Zekthal felt the explosion. Through the hull of his ship, the energy readings from Luna Base went dark. His assault team was gone. 12 elite Cathari warriors killed by a single human who had chosen death over surrender. Commander Veltar said quietly, "We're receiving a transmission from the human homeworld." The main screen flickered to life, showing a human in military uniform. The man looked calm and professional, not at all like someone whose moon base had just been attacked. "This is General Robert Clark of the Earth Defense Force, the human. Said you have attacked one of our installations and killed our people. We demand you identify yourselves and explain your actions." Zekthal studied the human general. There was no fear in his voice, no pleading for mercy, just a simple demand for information, as if the Cathari were equals rather than conquerors. "I am Commander Zekthal of the Cathari Confederation," he replied. "Your world now belongs to us. Surrender, and your deaths will be quick." General Clark was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled, and it was the same kind of smile Jake Morrison had worn in the security footage. "Commander, I think you misunderstand. Our situation? You just killed one of our Marines." His name was Jake Morrison. He had a wife and 2 kids back home. They're going to want to know who killed their husband and father. Skethel felt something he had never experienced before. Was polite, almost conversational. But there was something underneath it that made his warrior instincts scream warnings. "You cannot threaten us," Zekthal said. "We are the apex predators of this galaxy. We have conquered 73 worlds. That's impressive, Commander, really. But you made one mistake." "What mistake?" General Clark's smile grew wider. "You assumed we were prey." The transmission ended, leaving Commander Zekthal staring at a blank screen. For the first time in 3,000 years of Cathari history, an apex predator was beginning to wonder if he had chosen the wrong target. In the depths of space, more human ships were already moving toward the Cathari fleet. And aboard those ships, thousands of Marines, just like Jake Morrison, were preparing for war. Dr. Lisa Grant stared at the alien corpse on her laboratory table and felt her blood turn cold. The Cathari warrior had been recovered from the wreckage of Luna Base. What she found inside its body changed everything she thought she knew. About their enemy, Lisa had been studying alien biology for 15 years aboard the research vessel Endeavor. She had examined creatures from dozens of worlds, but nothing had prepared her for this. The Cathari were not just naturally evolved predators. They were engineered weapons. Every organ in the alien's body had been modified for killing. Its heart pumped a synthetic blood substitute that carried 3 times more oxygen than human blood. Its muscles were reinforced with carbon fiber threads that made them stronger than steel cables. Its bones were hollow like a bird's, but filled with a metallic foam that made them nearly unbreakable. But the most terrifying discovery was in the creature's brain. Implants connected to every nerve cluster, designed to eliminate fear, hesitation, and mercy. The Cathari had spent generations turning themselves into perfect killing machines. "Captain Rodriguez needs to see this immediately," Lisa said to her assistant, Dr. Kevin Walsh. Captain Ben Rodriguez arrived at the lab within minutes. As the commanding officer of Earth's Outer Defense Fleet, he had been waiting for any intelligence that might help humanity survive the coming war. What Lisa showed him made him understand just how desperate their situation really was. They've been doing this for thousands of years, Lisa explained, pointing to scans of the alien's modified skeleton. Each generation becomes more dangerous than the last. We're not fighting a natural species, Captain. We're fighting the end result of millennia of genetic warfare evolution. Ben studied the holographic displays showing the aliens' enhanced physiology. How many species have they conquered? Based on the cultural data we've recovered, at least 73 worlds. And Ben, none of those species exist anymore. The Cathari don't take prisoners or create slave populations. They exterminate everything and take the planets for themselves. The weight of that information settled on Ben's shoulders like a lead blanket. Humanity was facing an enemy that had perfected the art of genocide across multiple star systems. An enemy that had never known. Defeat. His communication device buzzed with an urgent message. Captain, we're receiving reports from the Proxima colony. They're under attack. Ben rushed to the bridge where the main screen showed a live feed from Proxima Centauri. The human colony there was small, only about 10,000 settlers, but it was humanity's first successful interstellar settlement. Now it was burning. Lieutenant Amy Chen piloted her fighter through the chaos above Proxima colony. She had been patrolling the system when the Cathari fleet arrived without warning. 12 massive warships had dropped out of hyperspace and immediately began bombing the surface installations. Amy's fighter squadron was outnumbered 20-1. But they fought with everything they had. The human pilots used tactics that would have been considered suicide by military standards. They flew directly into Cathari formation patterns, forcing the aliens to fire through their own ships to hit the humans. This is crazy. Her wingman, Lieutenant Tom Brady, shouted over the radio as he barreled between two alien cruisers. We're supposed to be dead already. Amy watched her scanner as another Cathari fighter exploded under her guns. The alien pilots were skilled, and their ships were faster, but they flew in predictable patterns. They seemed confused when the humans didn't follow standard fighter tactics. Tom, did you notice something weird about how they fight? Amy asked, diving under a barrage of plasma fire. You mean besides the fact that they're trying to kill us? They keep hesitating, like they're waiting for us to do something we're not doing. Amy was right. The Cathari pilots had been trained to fight opponents who would retreat when outnumbered, who would try to preserve their forces for a better opportunity. Instead, the human pilots kept attacking even when their situation was hopeless. On the surface of Proxima colony, the fighting was even more intense. Cathari ground forces had landed expecting to find panicked civilians fleeing in terror. Instead, they found farmers and miners who had turned their tools into weapons and were fighting house by house through the settlement. Private Danny Park had been visiting his sister's family when the attack began. He was supposed to be on leave from his unit, but when alien warriors started killing colonists, Danny grabbed his sister's mining laser and joined the defense. The Cathari warrior that cornered him in the storage warehouse was 8 feet tall and armed with weapons that could cut through steel. Danny was 5'6" and carrying a tool designed for cutting rock. By every logical measure, the fight should have lasted about 3 seconds. Instead, Danny used the warehouse's layout against his opponent. He triggered avalanches of stored grain that buried the alien, used the industrial lifting equipment to drop heavy machinery on it, finally cornered the creature in the chemical storage area where he mixed 2 cleaning compounds that created a cloud of toxic gas. When reinforcements found Danny 4 hours later, he was sitting on top of the dead alien, eating a sandwich he had found in someone's lunchbox. How did you kill it? Sergeant Mike Torres asked, staring at the massive corpse. Danny shrugged. I used to work pest control, back on Earth. Rats, cockroaches, you know. Same principle, just bigger. The casual way Danny described killing a genetically enhanced super predator sent chills through the other soldiers. But it also gave them hope. If a guy on vacation could kill one of these things with cleaning supplies, maybe humanity wasn't as helpless as everyone thought. Back on the Endeavor, Dr. Lisa Grant was making another disturbing discovery. She had been analyzing recordings of the battles, and the Cathari behavior patterns were all wrong. They're afraid, she told Captain Rodriguez during their emergency meeting. I've been studying the footage from both Luna Base and Proxima Colony. The Cathari are showing signs of psychological stress. Afraid? These things are apex predators. What could they possibly be afraid of? Lisa pulled up a biological comparison chart on her screen. Ben, I've been studying Earth's evolutionary history. Do you know what makes our planet different from every other world the Cathari have conquered? Our stubborn attitude? Earth is a death world. Ben stared at her. Come again? Look at the data. Every species the Cathari have defeated evolved on worlds with stable climates, predictable ecosystems, and relatively few natural disasters. Their evolution was gradual and peaceful. But Earth has been trying to kill everything on it for 4 billion years. Lisa's holographic display showed Earth's history. Ice ages that lasted millions of years, volcanic eruptions that blocked out the sun, asteroid impacts that wiped out entire species, plagues, floods, droughts, and predators that forced every surviving creature to adapt or die. We didn't evolve to be the strongest or the fastest, Lisa continued. We evolved to survive anything the universe could throw at us. We're the products of a world that made extinctional events into Tuesday afternoons. The implications of her discovery were staggering. Humanity wasn't just another species for the Cathari to conquer. They were something entirely outside the aliens' experience. They were survivors from a world that had taught them to fight impossible. Odds and win, Captain Rodriguez felt something he hadn't experienced since the war began. Hope. Lisa, can you put together a complete analysis of human versus Cathari psychology? I need to understand exactly what advantages we have. Already working on it. But Ben, there's something else. I've been monitoring Cathari communications during the battles. They have a word they keep using when they talk about humans. I had the computer translate it. What's the word? Lisa's expression was grim. Monsters. Colonel Rick Stone stood in the command center of Titan Station, studying the tactical displays that showed the approaching Cathari fleet. 300 alien warships were heading directly toward humanity's most important military base in the outer system. By every calculation, Titan Station should fall within hours. Rick had other plans. The colonel had spent 30 years fighting wars across the solar system. He had learned that the best way to beat a superior enemy was to make them fight your kind of battle, not theirs. The Cathari expected humans to behave like every other species they had conquered. Rick intended to give them something completely different. All units, this is Colonel Stone, he announced over the station-wide communication system. The aliens think they know how this fight is going to go. They think we'll try to hold defensive positions and fight them ship to ship. They're wrong. Rick's plan was simple and completely insane. Instead of defending Titan Station, he was going to turn it into the galaxy's largest booby trap. The Cathari fleet arrived in perfect formation. Their ships arranged in attack patterns that had worked on 73 other worlds. Commander Zekthal led the assault personally, determined to crush human resistance once and for all. The loss of his warriors on Luna Base had been an embarrassment. Failure to completely destroy Proxima Colony had been worse. This time, there would be no human survivors. Begin the bombardment, Zekthal ordered. Reduce the station to atoms. But as the Cathari ships moved into firing position, something unexpected happened. The humans weren't shooting back. Titan Station's massive defense guns remained silent. Its fighter squadrons stayed in their launch bays. The only response from the station was a single radio transmission. "Attention Cathari fleet," came a human voice. This is Private Danny Park. "Yeah, the same guy who killed your warrior with cleaning supplies. I got a message for you." Commander Zekthal recognized the name. It's the human who had somehow defeated. A fully enhanced Cathari warrior using primitive tools had become a legend among his people. But legends could still die. "Speak your message, human," Zekthal replied. "We got something for you. It's a present. Hope you like surprises." The transmission ended, and the Cathari fleet opened fire on Titan Station. Their plasma cannons and particle beams struck the station's outer hull, creating massive explosions that lit up the darkness of space. But instead of the catastrophic destruction they expected, something else happened. The explosions triggered a chain reaction. Colonel Rick Stone had spent 6 months preparing Titan Station for this moment. Every fuel depot, every ammunition storage facility, Every reactor core had been rigged with precisely calculated explosive charges, but Rick hadn't been trying to destroy the station. He had been turning it into the galaxy's largest fragmentation. Bomb! As the Cathari weapons hit the station, Rick's charges detonated in sequence. Massive sections of the station broke apart and flew outward like deadly projectiles. But these weren't random chunks of debris. Rick had calculated the trajectory of every piece, turning the station's destruction into a carefully aimed attack. Cathari. Ships found themselves bombarded by multi-ton pieces of metal moving at incredible speeds. Their shields, designed to stop energy weapons, were useless against solid matter traveling at several kilometers per second. Ships that had survived battles against entire fleets were crippled by flying chunks of space station. But the real surprise came when the Cathari tried to retreat. As their ships turned to escape the debris field, they discovered that the humans had been busy during the bombardment. Small groups of human fighters had been moving through the chaos, attaching explosive charges to alien ship hulls. Private Sally Jackson had volunteered for one of the most dangerous missions in military history. She and 3 other Marines had used personal maneuvering units to fly through the battle, hiding among the debris while placing charges on Cathari ships. It was a suicide mission that had required perfect timing and incredible luck. "This is Jackson," she reported over the radio as her team finished attaching the last explosives. "Packages delivered. Hope you boys are ready for fireworks." The charges detonated simultaneously. 12 Cathari warships exploded from the inside, their hulls cracking open like broken eggs. The remaining alien ships found themselves trapped in a debris field with human fighters attacking from every direction. "Commander?" Zekthal watched in horror as his perfect formation dissolved into chaos. The humans weren't fighting like any species he had ever encountered. They were using tactics that seemed designed to cause maximum psychological damage rather than military victory, where his communications officer reported, "We're receiving video transmissions from the human fighters." The main screen showed human pilots laughing as they attacked. One pilot was singing an old Earth song while firing missiles. Another was making jokes about alien anatomy over an open channel. These creatures were enjoying themselves in the middle of a life-or-death battle. The worst transmission came from a human pilot who had somehow managed to land his damaged fighter on the hull of a Cathari cruiser. The man climbed out of his cockpit, walked to the nearest airlock, and began cutting through it with a plasma torch. "Hey there, alien buddies," the pilot said cheerfully into his helmet camera. "Thought I'd drop by for a visit. Hope you don't mind uninvited guests." The pilot, Lieutenant Bobby Wright, cut through the airlock and disappeared inside the ship. For the next 20 minutes, the Cathari crew could hear him moving through their ship's corridors, whistling happily while he hunted them. The sound of human laughter echoed through the ship's communication system as Bobby systematically disabled their weapons and life support. When the ship finally went dark, Bobby's voice came over the radio one last time. "Thanks for the tour, folks. 5 stars would definitely invade again." The psychological impact on the Cathari fleet was devastating. These weren't warriors fighting for survival. These were predators who had found new prey and were having fun with it. For the first time in their history, Fichetti began to understand what their victims had felt during previous conquests. "Commander." Skfel made a decision that would have been unthinkable a month earlier. He ordered a full retreat. The battle of Titan Station ended with the complete withdrawal of the Cathari fleet. He left behind 37 destroyed ships and hundreds of dead warriors. The humans had lost 1 space station and 23 fighters. By any mathematical analysis, the battle should have been a decisive alien victory. Instead, it became the turning point of the war. News of the victory spread throughout human space in hours. More importantly, it spread through Cathari space. As well, for the first time, other species in the galaxy began to hear whispers about a new threat. Stories about creatures from a death world who fought like nothing the universe had ever seen. Dr. Lisa Grant received the battle reports aboard the Endeavour and immediately began analyzing the psychological profiles of the Cathari survivors. What she found confirmed her worst fears and greatest hopes. "They're developing trauma responses," she told Captain Rodriguez. The Cathari warriors who survived Titan Station are showing signs of what we would call post-traumatic stress disorder. Some of them are refusing to fight humans. That's impossible, Rodriguez replied. We're genetically engineered to eliminate fear. That's what makes it so significant. We're not just beating them in battle, Ben. We're breaking their minds. The Cathari have never encountered a species that fights back the way we do. Their entire psychology is built around being the hunters, never the hunted. Lisa pulled up video footage from the battle, showing Cathari warriors retreating in apparent panic from human attacks that should have been easily defeated. They're starting to see us the way their victims used to see them.
Oh.
We've become the monsters in their nightmares. Captain Rodriguez watched the footage of human pilots laughing while they destroyed alien ships. And for the first time since the war began, he understood what humanity was becoming. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were becoming the thing that apex predators feared. Captain Steve Murphy stood on the bridge of his ship, the Reaper, watching the Cathari supply convoy through his tactical display. 6 months after the Battle of Titan Station, everything had changed. The humans were no longer defending their worlds. They were hunting. Steve commanded what the media had nicknamed the Ghost Fleet. 12 human ships that appeared without warning, struck fast, and vanished before the enemy could respond. They had destroyed 47 Cathari vessels in the past month alone, and the aliens still had no idea how to stop them. Target acquired, reported his tactical officer, Lieutenant Nancy Davis. 1 heavy cruiser, 2 destroyers, and 4 cargo ships, like standard escort formation. Steve studied the enemy ships on his screen. 6 months ago, this convoy would have been considered an overwhelming force. Now it looked like easy prey. Ships, this is Murphy. You know the drill. Fast, loud, and scary. Let's give them something to think about. The Ghost Fleet attacked from 6 different directions at once. The human ships used a new technology developed by engineer Kate Williams, called the Chaos Protocol. Instead of following predictable attack patterns, the ships moved according to random calculations that even their own crews couldn't predict. The Cathari convoy tried to respond with their standard defensive formations, but their weapons kept firing at empty space. The human ships were never where the alien computers predicted they would be. Lieutenant Chris Brown piloted his fighter through the battle with his speakers blasting old rock music. He had painted a smiley face on his ship's nose, and every time he destroyed an alien fighter, he broadcast a cheerful "Have a nice day" over the radio. The psychological effect on the Cathari pilots was immediate. They had been trained to fight rational opponents who followed logical tactics. Instead, they found themselves fighting enemies who seemed to have no fear of death and treated warfare like a game. The convoy was destroyed in 18 minutes. No human ships were lost. On the Cathari homeworld, Commander Zekthal received the battle report with growing despair. This was the 3rd convoy lost this week. The humans were no longer content to defend their territory. They were actively hunting Cathari forces throughout the galaxy. Sir. His aide, Veltar said quietly, the High Council is demanding explanations. They want to know why a primitive species is defeating our fleets. Zekthal had been asking himself the same question for months. The humans should have been extinct by now. Instead, they had somehow turned a war of conquest into a nightmare of psychological terror. The answer came from an unexpected source. A surviving warrior from the latest convoy attack had been rescued by a patrol ship. The warrior, a veteran of 20 campaigns, was found curled in a corner of his escape pod, muttering about laughing demons and singing death. They're not fighting a war, the warrior whispered when Zekthal questioned him. They're playing with us, like we're toys for their amusement. Zekthal knew that desperate times called for desperate measures. Deep in the vaults beneath the Cathari capital, ancient weapons waited in stasis. The Void Hunters had been sealed, away for millennia. Considered too dangerous even for the galaxy's apex predators. The Void Hunters were the product of genetic engineering so extreme that even the Cathari considered them abominations. They were pure killing machines, designed to hunt and destroy everything they encountered. They had no intelligence, no mercy, and no fear. They were weapons of absolute extinction. "Release them on the human colony of New Boston," Zechthel ordered. "If these creatures cannot stop the humans, nothing can." The transport ship arrived at New Boston under cover of darkness. The human colony was home to 50,000 settlers, mostly farmers and their families. It should have been a perfect target for the Void Hunters. Sergeant Maria Santos was on patrol when the monsters landed. She had been a Marine for 12 years and had fought in dozens of battles against the Cathari. But nothing had prepared her for what crawled out of the alien transport. The Void Hunters looked like nightmares made real. They stood 12 feet tall with 6 arms ending in razor-sharp claws. Their skin was black as space and covered in bony plates that could deflect most weapons. They had no eyes, but their other senses were so acute they could track a target. By heartbeat alone, 3 of the creatures emerged from the ship and immediately began hunting. They moved faster than anything Maria had ever seen, flowing across the ground like liquid death. The first colonist they encountered was torn apart. In seconds, Maria grabbed her radio and called for backup, but she knew it would take hours for military support to arrive. The colonists were on their own. What happened next became the stuff of legend throughout the galaxy. Instead of fleeing in terror like every other species the Void Hunters had encountered, the colonists of New Boston did something completely unexpected. They adapted. Farmer Joe Clark was the first to figure out how to fight the creatures. He noticed that they hunted by sound and movement, so he used his knowledge of pest control to set traps. Within hours, he had rigged his entire farm with motion sensors connected to agricultural equipment. When the first Void Hunter came after his family, Joe triggered a threshing machine that caught the creature in its rotating blades. The monster was torn apart before it could react. "Well, I'll be damned," Joe said to his wife Betty. "They died just like everything else." Word spread quickly through the colony's communication network. The monsters could be killed. They were fast and dangerous, but they weren't invincible. More importantly, they were predictable in ways that made them vulnerable to human creativity. Dr. Susan Lee, the colony's veterinarian, discovered that the creatures were attracted to certain chemical compounds. She quickly synthesized a pheromone trail that led the second Void Hunter directly into the colony's waste processing plant, where it was dissolved in industrial acid. The third creature lasted the longest, hunting through the colony for 2 days, before 10-year-old Emma Wilson figured out its weakness. She noticed that the monster always avoided bright lights, so she and her friends used the colony's searchlights to herd it into the community center, where the adults were waiting with heavy mining equipment when the Cathari recovery team arrived. 3 days later, they expected to find a dead colony and 3 satisfied Void Hunters. Instead, they found something that defied every law of galactic biology. The humans had not only survived, they had domesticated the creatures. Farmer Clark was using a modified Void Hunter. As a guard animal for his livestock, Dr. Lee had sedated another one and was studying its biology in her clinic. The third creature had apparently bonded with young Emma Wilson and was following her around like an enormous, deadly pet. The Cathari team leader whispered as he watched a human child playing fetch with a monster that had been designed to kill gods. Maria Santos, now promoted to colonel for her role in defending the colony, answered with a shrug. "They're just big animals. Everything can be tamed if you understand what makes it tick." The Cathari team retreated without making contact. Their report to Commander Zechthel was brief and terrifying. The humans had not just defeated the Void Hunters, they had made them into pets. Dr. Lisa Grant received the intelligence reports aboard the Endeavour and realized that humanity has crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. They were no longer just fighting for survival. They had become something that frightened the galaxy's most dangerous predators. "Ben," she told Captain Rodriguez, "I've been analyzing the psychological profiles of Cathari prisoners. They're not calling us monsters anymore. What are they calling us?" Lisa's expression was grim. "The Devourers. They think we're some kind of cosmic horror that exists to hunt apex predators." Captain Rodriguez looked at the reports from New Boston, where humans were walking nightmare creatures on leashes and using them to help with farm work. Maybe the aliens were right. Commander Zekthal stood before the High Council of the Cathari Confederation, his head bowed in shame. The first time in 3,000 years, the galaxy's apex predators were about to surrender to another species. The council chamber was filled with the most powerful Cathari in the galaxy. Warriors who had conquered dozens of worlds, scientists who had perfected the art of genetic warfare, and admirals who had commanded fleets that could destroy entire star systems. Now they all looked like frightened children. Report, demanded High Chancellor Vexamore. Cybernetic implants glowing red with anger, Zedsu Cathal activated the holographic display that showed the current state of the war. Red zones marked human-controlled territory, which now covered nearly half the galaxy. Yellow zones showed areas where Cathari forces were under constant attack. Green zones, representing safe Cathari space, had shrunk to a few systems around their homeworld. The humans have taken 47 star systems in the past month, Zekthal reported. Our losses include 300 warships, 12 space stations, and approximately 50,000 warriors. What are our casualties? Asked War Leader Kreshevel. Unknown. The council chamber fell silent. In 3 millennia of conquest, the Cathari had never faced an enemy whose casualties they couldn't estimate. The humans don't seem to distinguish between military and civilian targets, Zekthal continued. But they're not destroying our populations. They're converting them. Converting them to what? Zekthal hesitated before answering. Allies. Da-da-da-da-da-da. Holographic display showed footage from the conquered Cathari worlds. Instead of the mass graves and devastated landscapes that usually followed conquest, the images showed something far more disturbing. Cathari civilians were working alongside human settlers, helping to build new colonies and trade routes. They're not killing us, Zekthal explained. They're making us part of their civilization. The humans offer food, medical care, and protection to any Cathari who surrender. Most of our people are accepting. High Chancellor Vexmer stared at the images in disbelief. This is impossible. No species has ever willingly joined their conquerors. No species has ever been conquered by humans before. The truth was becoming clear to everyone in the chamber. The humans weren't following any pattern of conquest that the Cathari understood. They weren't destroying their enemies or enslaving them. They were absorbing them into something larger. Dr. Lisa Grant stood in the communication center of the human flagship Retribution, preparing for the most important conversation in galactic history. Admiral Claire Patterson had been chosen to deliver humanity's terms to the Cathari leadership. Claire was a veteran of 30 years in the Earth's Defense Force. She had commanded the fleet that broke the siege of Mars and led the assault that captured the Cathari fortress at Alpha Centauri. She was also known for her diplomatic skills and her ability to negotiate with alien species. Admiral Lisa said, "I've completed the psychological profile of the Cathari leadership. They're operating from a position of complete terror. Don't understand what we want from them." Claire reviewed the intelligence reports on her tablet. The Cathari had spent months trying to understand human motivations and had failed completely. They couldn't comprehend a species that conquered worlds but didn't exterminate the previous inhabitants. "What do we want from them, Lisa?" Claire asked. "Peace, but they can't understand that concept. In their experience, war only ends when one species is extinct." The communication link to the Cathari homeworld activated, and High Chancellor Vexamer appeared on the main screen. The alien leader looked exhausted and defeated, his cybernetic implants dim with despair. "I am Admiral Claire Patterson of the Human Defense Fleet," Claire said formally. "I speak for all of humanity." "State your terms for our surrender," Vexamer replied. Claire paused, choosing her words carefully. "We're not asking for your surrender, Chancellor. We're offering you a choice." "What choice?" "Join us, or continue fighting until your species is extinct. But understand that if you choose to fight, we will hunt you across every star in this galaxy. We will turn your own weapons against you and make your warriors afraid to leave their ships. We will become the nightmare that keeps your children awake at night." The Cathari leadership exchanged glances. It heard reports of human psychological warfare tactics. Entire Cathari fleets had surrendered, rather than face human hunters in open battle. "And if we join you?" Vexamer asked. "Then you become part of something bigger than either of our species. You get to keep your worlds, your culture, and your lives. All we ask is that you stop trying to exterminate other species." The terms were so simple that the Cathari couldn't believe them. After months of expecting complete destruction, they were being offered partnership. Commander Paul Jackson walked through the streets of New Geneva, the first joint human Cathari city. 6 months after the peace treaty, the impossible had become routine. Human children played with young Cathari. While their parents worked together on construction projects and scientific research, Paul commanded the Diplomatic Protection Force, humanity's first interstellar peacekeeping unit. His job was to ensure that the growing alliance between former aliens remained stable. The Cathari had adapted to peace faster than anyone expected. Without the genetic programming that forced them to be killers, many of them had discovered talents for art, science, and engineering. They were contributing to human society in ways that no one had predicted. Commander Jackson called Dr. Marcus Webb, the city's chief administrator. "We have a situation at the spaceport." Paul followed Marcus to the landing pads, where a crowd had gathered around a newly arrived ship. The vessel bore the markings of the Zalone Empire, another aggressive species that had been expanding into human space. 3 Zalone warriors had exited their ship and were demanding tribute from the human colonists. They were tall, reptilian creatures with natural armor and venomous claws. They had probably expected to find easy prey. Instead, they found themselves facing a crowd of humans and Cathari, working together. "You will submit to Zalone authority," the lead warrior announced. "This world now belongs to the Empire." Paul stepped forward, his hands empty, but his expression calm. "I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. This world is under human protection." The Zalone warrior laughed. "Humans, you are weak mammals. We are apex predators." A ripple of laughter went through the crowd. Several Cathari were making amused, chittering sounds that served as their equivalent of chuckling. "I'm sorry," Paul said politely, "but there seems to be some confusion about the current galactic political situation. You see, the Cathari used to be the apex predators around here," gestured to the Cathari in the crowd, and the Zalone warriors noticed them for the first time. The reptilian aliens took a step back, recognizing the infamous conquerors of 73 worlds. "The Cathari are our allies now," Paul continued, "which means we humans must be whatever it is that apex predators are afraid of." The psychological impact was immediate. The Zalone warriors had heard rumors about the fall of the Cathari Confederation, but seeing the legendary killers working peacefully alongside humans made the stories real. "We will return with a full fleet," the lead Zalone threatened. "Do," Paul replied cheerfully. "We enjoy meeting new species. Just ask the Cathari how that usually works out." The Zalone warriors retreated to their ship and left the system within the hour. Dr. Lisa Grant received the report from New Geneva and added it to her growing file on human diplomatic encounters. In the 6 months since the war ended, 12 different species had attempted to challenge human expansion. All of them had withdrawn after learning about humanity's alliance with the Cathari. Word was spreading through the galaxy about the species that had tamed the trade routes were being rerouted to avoid human space. Aggressive empires were reconsidering their expansion plans. The Galactic Council had passed an emergency resolution classifying Earth as a restricted world and humanity as a species of extreme caution. But perhaps the most significant change was in the Cathari themselves. Commander Zekthal, now serving as a cultural liaison between the two species, had become humanity's most effective ambassador. "Why do you help us?" Alien diplomats often asked him. Zekthal's answer had become famous throughout the galaxy. "Because we learned the difference between being an apex predator and being the thing that apex predators have nightmares about." The galaxy had a new apex species, and they had earned their position not through superior technology or genetic enhancement, but by proving that the most dangerous predator is often the one that doesn't look dangerous at all. In the end, the Cathari had been right about one thing. They had unleashed an apex predator. It had just been wrong about which species that was.